Brookhaven's corrupt cops thought they were untouchable. They had the badges, the backing, and enough buried bodies to keep everyone quiet. Their trafficking empire turned teenage girls into cargo and dirty money into power. No one dared to challenge them until they met the ghost. The paperwork said military consultant. But before she was Aaliyah Carter, before she came home to her sick mother, she was something else. Something that made Navy SEALs whisper and terrorists pray. The kind of operative who could walk into hell and bring it down from inside. Now she's locked in their cell, surrounded by dirty cops and cartel killers, smiling that quiet smile. They think they've caught her. She's about to show them why that was their last mistake. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Brookhaven's Main Street as Aaliyah Carter stepped out of her rental car. Her military boots made no sound on the cracked sidewalk, a habit ingrained by years of training. At first glance, she looked like any other visitor. Dark jeans, a navy blue jacket, and a simple black backpack. But there was something in her posture, in the way her eyes constantly scanned her surroundings, that set her apart from the occasional passers-by hurrying along the street. A dull ache pulsed through her left shoulder, making her adjust the backpack strap. 3 months wasn't enough time to forget the searing pain of a bullet tearing through muscle and tissue. That mission, like so many others, would remain classified. Another scar, another story she couldn't tell, another reason she was here in Brookhaven on mandatory medical leave instead of leading her team. The town felt smaller than she remembered. 3 years of absence had changed things, or maybe it was her perspective that had shifted. The familiar storefronts of her childhood now wore shadows of neglect. Paint peeled from window frames, and too many for lease signs dotted the business district. Even the people seemed different, hurried, nervous, their eyes downcast as they rushed past. Anderson Memorial Hospital loomed ahead, its weathered brick facade a testament to decades of small-town medical care. The automatic doors wheezed open, releasing a blast of antiseptic-scented air that brought back memories of scraped knees and childhood mishaps. But today's visit wasn't about her. The reception area buzzed with quiet activity. A young mother tried to corral 2 energetic children while filling out forms. An elderly man dozed in a corner chair, an oxygen tank at his side. At the desk, a nurse looked up expectantly as Aaliyah approached. "I'm looking for Margaret Carter," Aaliyah said, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. The nurse's fingers danced across her keyboard. "Room 412, she replied, then added with practiced courtesy, "Are you family?" Her daughter. The elevator hummed as it carried her to the 4th floor. Aaliyah used the moment of solitude to center herself, to push down the guilt of too many missed visits, too many calls cut short by duties she couldn't explain. Her mother thought she worked as a military consultant, reviewing training protocols and writing reports. The lie tasted bitter, but it was better than the truth, better than admitting her daughter led classified missions that officially didn't exist. The hospital corridor stretched before her, fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow on pale green walls. Room 412 was at the end, door half open. Through the gap, Aaliyah could see her mother sitting up in bed, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, dark fingers tracing lines in a book on her lap. "Mom?" Margaret Carter's head snapped up, her face transforming with joy. "Aaliyah, baby, you didn't tell me you were coming?" She reached out with both arms, and Aaliyah stepped into her embrace, careful of the IV line that snaked from her mother's arm to a gently beeping machine. "Thought I'd surprise you," Aaliyah said, settling into the chair beside the bed. Her trained eye automatically cataloged the room's features: window overlooking the parking lot, 2 possible exit routes, standard hospital security measures. Old habits died hard. "You look tired, baby," Margaret said, studying her daughter's face with maternal concern. "Those consultants working you too hard?" Aaliyah forced a smile. "Nothing I can't handle." She shifted in her chair, suppressing a wince as her shoulder protested. "Tell me what the doctors are saying." For the next hour, they talked about treatments and progress. about the neighbors who brought casseroles, about everything except the worry lines around Margaret's eyes and the way her hospital gown hung loose on her frame. When a nurse came to check vitals, Aaliyah used it as an excuse to step out, promising to return the next day. The walk through her old neighborhood felt like moving through a dream where everything was slightly wrong. The Mitchell's Corner Store, once a neighborhood hub where kids bought penny candy and adults gossiped over coffee, was boarded up. The basketball court where she'd spent countless afternoons was surrounded by new chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire. A no loitering sign hung crookedly on the gate, but it was the people that troubled her most. Mrs. Thompson, who used to bring her cookies after school, hurried inside her house when she saw Aaliyah approaching. Two teenagers playing basketball stopped their game to watch her pass, their expressions wary. Even the air felt different, heavy with something unspoken, a tension that hadn't been there before. Walker's Market was her next stop. The grocery store had been a fixture of downtown Brookhaven since before she was born, its red brick exterior and hand-painted window signs a reminder of simpler times. Her mother needed some basic supplies, and Aaliyah wanted to restock her own temporary apartment. The store's interior was eerily quiet for a weekday afternoon. As she selected fruit from a display near the front, raised voices from the back of the store caught her attention. Years of training had taught her to listen while appearing not to. "Look, Officer Bradley, I told you, business has been slow. I can't afford another increase." Tom Walker's voice was hushed but desperate. The store owner sounded nothing like the jovial man who used to slip her extra candy as a child. "That's not how this works, Tom." The response came in a low growl. "Sheriff Cole's been very patient, but patience has limits. You wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen to this nice store of yours." Aaliyah moved silently along the aisle, maintaining casual movements while positioning herself to observe. Two uniformed officers stood uncomfortably close to Walker, who was backed against his office door. The older officer's hand rested meaningfully on his weapon, while his partner scanned the store with predatory alertness. She deliberately knocked over a display of canned goods. The crash drew their attention, and she made a show of clumsily gathering the cans. "I'm so sorry about that," she called out, giving the officers a clear view of her face. They exchanged glances, and the older one, Bradley, stepped back. "Think about what we discussed, Tom," he said before they departed, their exit too quick to be casual. Walker's hands were shaking as he helped her pick up the last cans. "You don't have to do that, miss." "Aaliyah Carter," she introduced herself. "Margaret Carter's daughter." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Little Aaliyah? Lord, you've grown. How's your mama doing?" Before she could answer, the store's bell chimed as another officer entered. This one was younger, his uniform crisp and his badge gleaming. The nameplate read, Miller. "Ms. Carter?" His face lit up with recognition. "Jason Miller, I saw you speak at the Naval Academy last year. Your presentation on international cooperation in maritime security was fascinating." Aaliyah shook his offered hand, noting the genuine enthusiasm in his voice while wondering what else he might know about her. "Always glad to meet someone interested in maritime security," she replied neutrally. "Are you in town long?" His question seemed innocent enough, but her instincts tingled at the careful way he watched her face. "Just visiting my mother." She gestured to her basket. "Should get these paid for," Miller nodded, but his eyes followed her to the checkout. Through the store window, she spotted a black SUV idling across the street. It pulled away as soon as she looked at it. The Blue Plate Diner was nearly empty when she met Naomi Jackson, there an hour later. Her childhood friend had traded her wild curls for a professional bob, but her smile was the same one that had gotten them into and out of trouble throughout high school. "Girl, you should have told me you were coming." "Home," Naomi said as they hugged, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Last-minute decision." Aaliyah studied her friend's face as they settled into a booth. "How's the reporting business?" Naomi glanced around before leaning forward. "Interesting. Too interesting, maybe. You remember Michael Ross? The guy who used to write for the Herald. What about him?" "He was working on a story about missing persons cases. Young women, mostly. Police said they were runaways, but Michael thought there was more to it. Naomi stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against the ceramic in the quiet diner. He disappeared 3 months ago. Police say he moved to Chicago, but his apartment's still full of his stuff. His cat was there too, half-starved when the landlord finally checked. A waitress approached and they paused their conversation to order. Once she left, Naomi continued in a lower voice. Things have changed here, Aaliyah. People are scared. The police, they're everywhere, but nobody feels safer. Small businesses are closing because they can't afford the protection fees. Anyone who asks questions disappears or has accidents, or suddenly decides to move away. Like what happened at Walker's Market today, Aaliyah said, describing the scene she'd witnessed. Exactly. It started small. Security fees for businesses. Now it's everywhere. Nobody talks about it, but everybody pays. The ones who don't. Naomi shook her head. Let's just say insurance doesn't cover everything that can go wrong in a small business. Through the diner's window, Aaliyah watched. Businesses along Main Street closing early, owners triple-checking locks before hurrying to their cars. The sun hadn't even set yet, but the streets were already emptying. Roosevelt Park was deserted when she met Ethan Brooks there that evening. Her former JAG colleague had traded his uniform for a civilian suit, but his bearing was still military precise as he fell into step beside her on the walking path. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, noting how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. "Anything for my favorite seal." His attempt at humor fell flat. "I've been looking into what you asked about. The property records are interesting. In the last 2 years, half the commercial real estate in town has changed hands. All bought by shell companies that trace back to offshore accounts. Money laundering? Among other things. Sheriff Cole's department got a budget increase of 300%. Officially, it's from federal grants. Unofficially, he handed her a thumb drive. "Be careful with this, Aaliyah, and watch your back. That SUV that followed you from Walker's, it's been circling the park for the last 10 minutes. She didn't turn to look. Noted. Any other friendly faces I should know about? Deputy Miller's been asking questions about you. Wanted to know your security clearance level. He's new to the force, less than a year, but he's already deep in Cole's inner circle." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the park's entrance. A teenage girl burst from behind the gas station, terror etched on her face. 2 men in dark clothes grabbed her arms, trying to drag her toward a white van with tinted windows. Aaliyah's body tensed, combat instincts firing. But before she could move, police sirens wailed in the distance. The girl's eyes met hers across the darkening park, pleading, desperate. In that moment, Aaliyah knew her quiet reconnaissance was over. Sometimes choice is an illusion. Sometimes the path chooses you. As Aaliyah Carter moved toward the gas station, her shoulder aching and her combat training humming through her veins, she knew this was one of those times. Brookhaven's secrets were about to be dragged into the light, whether the town was ready or not. The girl's terrified expression burned itself into her memory. The moment that changed everything. The catalyst that would expose a web of corruption and violence festering beneath Brookhaven's peaceful facade. But for now, there was only the next step, the next breath, and the knowledge that whatever came next would test every skill she'd learned in the SEALs. The sun had fully set now, casting deep shadows across the gas station's parking lot. In the gathering darkness, Aaliyah Carter moved forward, silent and deadly, about to remind some very bad people why they should have left her hometown alone. Years of SEAL training took over as Aaliyah moved through the shadows. Her footsteps were silent on the cracked pavement, her breathing controlled despite the burning in her injured shoulder. The 2 men dragging the teenage girl hadn't noticed her yet, their attention focused on their struggling victim. The girl couldn't have been more than 15. Her school backpack lay torn on the ground, its contents scattered. One of her shoes had come off in the struggle, a bright pink sneaker that seemed to glow in the dim light of the gas station's flickering signs. Aaliyah closed the distance in 3 swift steps. The first man never saw her coming. She struck his neck precisely, a quick, brutal chop that sent him crumpling to the ground without a sound. The second kidnapper started to turn, releasing his grip on the girl. His eyes widened as Aaliyah's fist connected with his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. "Run!" she whispered to the girl, but the teenager stood frozen, trembling. "They have Elena," she sobbed, her voice barely audible. "My sister. They took her 2 weeks ago. Please, please help her." Before Aaliyah could respond, blinding lights flooded the area. Police cruisers screamed into the parking lot from 2 directions, their sirens drowning out any chance for further conversation. The vehicles boxed them in with practiced precision, hands where we can see them. The command boomed through a loudspeaker, distorting in the night air. Aaliyah raised her hands slowly, positioning herself between the girl and the police. Car. Doors slammed, and footsteps crunched on broken asphalt. Sheriff James Cole emerged from the lead vehicle, his bulk casting a long shadow in the cruiser's headlights. Sergeant Frank Hawkins flanked him, hand resting on his holstered weapon. Well, Cole drawled, his pale face twisted in a smirk. "What do we have here?" "These men were attempting to kidnap this girl," Aaliyah stated clearly, keeping her voice steady. "I intervened." Cole's smirk widened as he glanced at the fallen kidnappers. One was starting to stir, groaning. "Looks more like assault to me." "Hawkins, cuff her." "What?" The girl stepped forward. "No, she was helping me. They were trying to—" "Sarah Williams." Hawkins cut her off. "Your parents reported you missing an hour ago. Said you were acting out again, running around with bad influences." "That's not true," Sarah's voice cracked. "Please, you have to listen. My sister Elena will end up just like you if she doesn't learn to keep her mouth shut," Cole interrupted, his tone carrying a clear threat. He nodded to a female officer. "Take her home. Make sure her parents understand the importance of proper supervision." Aaliyah watched as Sarah was led away, the girl's terrified eyes locked on hers until she was placed in a patrol car. Meanwhile, the 2 kidnappers were being helped to their feet by other officers. No handcuffs, no questions. They walked away from the scene with casual confidence. "Miss Carter." Cole stepped closer, his bulk attempting to intimidate. "Military consultant, isn't that right? Here visiting your sick mother?" "You've done your homework," Aaliyah replied evenly. "Small town. Word gets around." He gestured to Hawkins. "Unfortunately, you've stuck your nose where it doesn't belong." "Sergeant?" Hawkins moved behind her with his cuffs. Aaliyah could have taken him down. The angle was perfect, his stance was sloppy, but that would only make things worse. She allowed him to secure her wrists, noting how he tightened the cuffs a notch too far. "Careful with those," Cole mocked. "Our guest has a bad shoulder, I hear." From the shadows near the gas station's convenience store, a familiar figure caught Aaliyah's attention. Naomi stood partially concealed behind a newspaper stand, her phone raised. She was recording. Hawkins spotted her too. "Hey, you there!" He started toward her. Naomi turned to run, but 2 officers were already approaching from behind. They grabbed her arms, confiscating her phone. One officer made a show of dropping it, then crushing it under his boot. "Destroying evidence now?" Aaliyah's voice carried across the parking lot. "What evidence?" Cole smiled. "Looks like a phone accidentally got damaged during a routine arrest. Speaking of which," he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, plastic bag containing white powder. "You won't believe what we found in your rental car, Miss Carter. That's not mine." "They all say that." Cole nodded to his men. "Get them both in separate cars, and make sure our concerned citizen understands the consequences of interfering with police business." They were escorted to different vehicles. Through the window, Aaliyah watched Naomi being placed in a cruiser on the far side of the lot. Her friend's face was a mask of barely contained fear. The drive to the police station was brief, but tense. Aaliyah memorized the route, noting cameras and security measures as they pulled into the station's parking lot. The building was relatively new, she noticed, probably part of the suspicious budget increase Ethan had mentioned. Inside, they were separated immediately. Naomi was taken down one hallway, while Aaliyah was led to a holding cell. The room was small, with concrete walls and a single bench. 2 other women were already inside. "Fresh meat," one of them sneered, as the cell door clanged shut. She was tall and muscular, with crude prison tattoos on her arms. Her companion, shorter but equally tough-looking, cracked her knuckles. Aaliyah noted their stances, their movements. These weren't ordinary inmates. Their technique as they spread out. The flanker spoke of professional training. "Ladies," Aaliyah said calmly, "we don't have to do this." The first woman swung without warning, a precise strike aimed at Aaliyah's injured shoulder. She blocked it smoothly, redirecting the force while conserving her energy. The second attacker moved in with a knee strike, but Aaliyah had already shifted her weight. The fight was brief but intense. Aaliyah maintained defensive positions, revealing just enough skill to protect herself without exposing her full capabilities. When it was over, both attackers lay groaning on the cell floor. "Next time," Aaliyah advised quietly, "check if your target has combat training before accepting the job." The cell door opened, and Sheriff Cole stood watching, his expression unreadable. "Having trouble adjusting to accommodation? Your welcoming committee needs work." He stepped into the cell, careful to stay out of her reach. "You should have stayed out of this, Miss Carter. Brookhaven has a certain way of doing things. Outsiders who don't understand that tend to have accidents. I was born here. But you're not from here anymore, are you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're just passing through. Smart people who pass through keep their heads down and their mouths shut." "Is that what happened to Elena Williams?" Cole's smile vanished. "You're a problem now. And I don't like problems. Threatening a military contractor." Aaliyah met his gaze. "That's bold." "Military contractor?" He chuckled. "According to your arrest report, you're just another junkie who assaulted an officer during a drug bust. Tragic how some veterans turn to substance abuse to cope with their trauma." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and don't worry about your friend. Miss Jackson is being processed for attempting to interfere with police business, but I'm sure she'll be fine, assuming she learns to mind her own business." The cell door slammed shut with finality. Through the small window, Aaliyah could see officers gathering, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. She had perhaps hours before they made another move. The night stretched on. More inmates were brought in, genuine ones this time, drunk and disorderly cases mostly. They gave Aaliyah and her would-be attackers a wide berth. Somewhere in the station, she could hear Naomi's voice raised in protest, followed by silence. Around midnight, a young officer brought water and stale sandwiches. He avoided eye contact as he passed them through the slot, but Aaliyah caught his nameplate. "Jenkins." His hands shook slightly. Not everyone on the force was comfortable with Cole's methods. "Officer Jenkins," she called softly as he turned to leave. "The Williams girl, Elena. How long has she been missing?" He hesitated. "We don't discuss ongoing investigations." "What investigation?" "According to Cole, she's just another runaway." Jenkins glanced nervously over his shoulder. "I have to go." Her sister knows she didn't run away. How many others are there? But he was already hurrying away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. In the cell, Aaliyah's former attackers watched the exchange with new interest. "You ask?" "Too many questions," the taller one said. "That's not healthy in Brookhaven. How much is Cole paying you?" They exchanged glances but didn't respond. It didn't matter. Their earlier fighting style had told her everything she needed to know. These weren't local thugs. They were trained professionals, probably ex-military or private security. The question was, why would a small-town sheriff need that kind of muscle? The night wore on. Aaliyah used the time to observe the station's routine, noting shift changes and security patterns. Every hour, she flexed her muscles subtly, keeping them ready. Her shoulder ached, but she pushed the pain aside through practiced meditation techniques. Around 3 in the morning, she heard movement in the corridor. Multiple footsteps trying to be quiet. A key turned in the lock. "Against the wall," a guard ordered. When Aaliyah complied, 4 officers entered. One carried restraints. "Time for transfer to county," he announced with a smile that suggested she wouldn't make it there. Aaliyah analyzed her options. The guards were bunched together, sloppy positioning that suggested overconfidence. The hallway would be monitored, but most night shift workers paid little attention to their screens. At this hour, before she could decide, a commotion erupted somewhere in the building. Shouts and running footsteps echoed through the corridors. One of the guards touched his radio, listening. "Bar fight at Jesse's," he reported. "All units needed." "This isn't a good time," another guard protested. "Cole's orders. Everyone responds to bar fights. Makes it look normal for the statistics." They argued briefly before reluctantly filing out, leaving Aaliyah alone again. She knew this wasn't over. They'd be back once the false alarm was handled. But now she had confirmation. Someone on the outside was watching, and they'd bought her some time. Dawn was breaking when Sheriff Cole returned. This time he had Sergeant Hawkins and Deputy Miller with him. Miller looked uncomfortable as Cole dropped a thick file on the cell's small table. "You've had quite a career, Miss Carter," Cole said, flipping through papers. "Multiple commendations for your consulting work, high-level security clearance, friends in interesting places." He pulled out a photograph, Aaliyah at a military ceremony, accepting an award. "Very impressive." "If you know all that," Aaliyah replied, "you know this won't end well for you. That depends on your definition of end." He produced a small evidence bag containing a familiar object, her military ID. Tragic accident, really. Troubled veteran, known substance abuse issues, resisting arrest. Sometimes people don't survive their own poor choices. Miller shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe you should remember your place, Deputy." Cole cut him off. "Unless you'd like to reconsider your career options?" The young officer fell silent, but Aaliyah noted the flash of doubt in his eyes. Not everyone was fully committed to Cole's corruption. That could be useful. "Here's what's going to happen," Cole continued. "You're being charged with drug possession, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer. Your friend, Miss Jackson, is facing similar charges. By the time this is sorted out in court, if it ever is, certain ongoing matters will be concluded." "Elena Williams," Aaliyah said. "How many others?" Cole's face hardened. "I tried to be reasonable. Remember that." He turned to Hawkins. "Process her for transfer, and make sure she understands the consequences of her choices." They left her alone. But Aaliyah knew the real danger was just beginning. Through the cell window, she watched the station coming alive with morning shift changes. She caught fragments of conversation, something about an incoming shipment, preparations that needed to be finished. Whatever was happening in Brookhaven, it was bigger than simple corruption. The professional muscle, the missing girls, the mysterious shipments. It all pointed to something much darker. And somewhere out there, Elena Williams, and who knew how many others were running out of time. Aaliyah settled onto the hard bench, appearing to rest while her mind raced through options. She'd been in worse situations during her SEAL operations, but this was different. This wasn't a foreign battlefield with clear enemies. This was her hometown, and the lines between friend and foe were blurred. The sun climbed higher, sending bars of light through the small cell window. Soon they would come for her, and the real fight would begin. But Aaliyah Carter hadn't survived years of special operations by being unprepared. Let them come, she thought. They didn't know who they were dealing with, and by the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The morning shift brought new guards, new routines, and new opportunities. Aaliyah watched, waited, and planned. When the moment came, she would be ready. Brookhaven's corruption had festered too long in the shadows. It was time to bring it into the light. The transport van took an unexpected turn, and Aaliyah's trained mind immediately registered the deviation. They weren't heading toward the county jail, at least not by any route that made sense. The morning sun cast strange shadows through the vehicle's small windows as they wound through back roads she barely recognized from her childhood. Her wrists were raw from the over-tightened cuffs, and her injured shoulder screamed in protest at each bump in the road. Two deputies sat across from her, their expressions blank behind mirrored sunglasses. Neither had spoken since they'd loaded her into the van 20 minutes ago. "Taking the scenic route?" Aaliyah asked casually, noting how the deputy on the left tensed at her voice. Quiet back there, the driver called through the partition. She recognized him as Officer Bradley from Walker's Market, one of Cole's trusted thugs. They passed a faded sign marking the old lumber mill road, and Aaliyah's suspicions deepened. This wasn't just a detour. They were deliberately avoiding main roads and traffic cameras, classic isolation tactics before an accident. The van hit a particularly nasty pothole, and one of the deputies cursed as he grabbed for balance. The movement revealed something interesting, a distinctive tattoo on his wrist, partially visible beneath his uniform sleeve. Aaliyah had seen similar marks before, during operations against private military contractors in zones that officially didn't exist. "Nice ink," she commented. "Which company? Black River? Or one of the smaller outfits?" His hand immediately covered the tattoo, but the reaction confirmed her suspicion. These weren't regular deputies, they were mercenaries playing dress-up. The question was, why would a small-town police department need hired guns? The van slowed as it approached a sharp bend in the road. Perfect ambush point, Aaliyah thought. Dense trees on both sides, no witnesses, easy disposal. She tensed, preparing for what was coming, but instead of stopping, the van accelerated through the turn. The real destination became clear as they passed through rusted gates, the old county workhouse, abandoned for decades but apparently not as empty as it should be. The facility's main building was a fortress of red brick and steel, its windows dark and uninviting. New security cameras tracked their approach, and the perimeter fence looked recently reinforced. Someone had put serious money into renovating this place off the books. "End of the line," Bradley announced as the van backed up to a loading dock. "Let's make this quick." The rear doors swung open, flooding the interior with harsh sunlight. As her eyes adjusted, Aaliyah counted 4 more armed men in deputy uniforms waiting outside. Their stances and weapon handling screamed military training. "Move!" one of the fake deputies ordered, grabbing her arm. Aaliyah allowed herself to be led inside, memorizing the layout. The building's interior had been extensively modified. New steel doors replaced the old wooden ones, and modern security systems covered every approach. The air smelled of fresh paint and gun oil. They took her to a cell block on the 2nd floor. Unlike the holding cells at the station, these were serious containment units with reinforced doors and electronic locks. Most were empty, but she caught glimpses of other prisoners as they passed, all women, all young. Her cell was at the end of the row. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a sparse interior. Concrete bed, stainless steel toilet, no windows, high-tech for a county facility that officially didn't exist. "Hands," the guard ordered. When she complied, he removed her cuffs before shoving her inside. The door sealed with a definitive click. Alone in the cell, Aaliyah immediately began a methodical inspection. The room was approximately 8 by 10 feet, with smooth walls offering no handholds. A ventilation duct in the ceiling was too small for escape. The door's hinges were on the outside, and the electronic lock required a keycard and code. A voice from the next cell caught her attention. "You're not making it to trial." "That's the plan," Aaliyah replied quietly, placing the voice as belonging to a young woman. "No, you don't understand." The voice was urgent now. "Nobody makes it to trial. They keep us here until the buyers come, then we disappear. Transport goes out every week. Human trafficking. The missing girls, the professional security, the hidden facility. It all fit. But the scale of the operation suggested resources beyond what even a corrupt police department could muster. "How long have you been here?" Aaliyah asked. 2 weeks. "I'm Julia. The girl in the cell beyond you is Maria. She's been here almost a month." "Any idea where they take people?" "Overseas, I think. We hear them talking sometimes. Something about ports and customs arrangements." Julia's voice dropped lower. "There was another girl here last week. She fought back during transport. They made an example of her." Aaliyah was about to respond when footsteps approached. A guard appeared at her cell accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who looked out of place in the grim facility. "Our new guest," the man said, studying her through the cell's observation window. "Sheriff Cole said you'd be trouble." "And you are?" "Someone who's invested a lot of money in this operation." He smiled thinly. I understand your prior military. We could use someone with your skills, Miss Carter. The pay is excellent. Not interested in human trafficking. His smile didn't waver. Morality is expensive. But perhaps watching what happens to your journalist friend will change your mind. Aaliyah kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. Naomi was still in custody at the main station. If they moved her here, think about it, the man said. You have until tonight. He turned to the guard. Proceed with the scheduled transport. Our buyers are getting impatient. After they left, Aaliyah heard soft crying from Julia's cell. The sound hardened her resolve. She had maybe 12 hours before they came for her, one way or another. The afternoon dragged on. Guards passed regularly, their patterns too precise to be standard corrections officers. Aaliyah used the time to exercise, keeping her muscles loose while appearing to rest. She noted shift changes, guard rotations, the timing of security checks. Around sunset, new voices echoed through the cell block. A woman was protesting as she was dragged past the cells. You can't do this. I'm a federal agent. The voice belonged to an inmate being returned from somewhere deeper in the facility. The guards roughly shoved her into a cell, laughing. Sure you are, honey, and I'm the tooth fairy. But Aaliyah had caught something in the woman's voice, a hint of trained calm beneath the panic. She waited until the guards moved away before speaking quietly. Which agency? A pause then. FBI, Sarah Wilson, Undercover Division. Been here 3 weeks trying to gather evidence. How's that working out? A bitter laugh. They made me on day 2. Been waiting to ship me out with the next batch. You military? Something like that. Any intel worth sharing? Place is run by Black Star Security, private military contractors working for a cartel. Local cops are just the visible piece. Whole operation goes way up. Politicians, judges, customs officials. They're moving people and weapons through multiple ports. The information confirmed Aaliyah's suspicions while raising new concerns. Black Star was serious business. Ex-Special Forces operators with few scruples and lots of connections. Transport tonight, Sarah continued. They'll be moving at least 6 of us. Security will be heavy, minimum 8 operators, maybe more. Sounds like an opportunity. You crazy? These aren't mall cops. They're trained killers. Aaliyah smiled. In the darkness. So am I. The sound of the door at the end of the cell block interrupted their conversation. Heavy footsteps approached. Multiple guards. Showtime. On your feet. A voice commanded as her cell door opened. Hands behind your head. Aaliyah complied, allowing them to cuff her again. They'd switched to zip ties, cheaper and faster, then metal cuffs, sloppy. They led her and 5 other women through the facility's corridors. Sarah was right about the security. 8 operators plus the man in the suit from earlier, watching from a catwalk above the loading dock. 2 unmarked. Vans waited outside. The evening air was cool, and clouds threatened rain. Perfect conditions for what was coming. As they approached the vehicles, Aaliyah noticed something interesting. The guards were professional, but they'd made a classic mistake. They were focused, outward, watching for external threats rather than their prisoners. The zip ties took 3 seconds to break, a technique she'd learned in SEER training. The nearest guard never saw her move. She drove her elbow into his throat, simultaneously sweeping his legs and taking his sidearm. All hell broke loose. The other guards reacted quickly, but Aaliyah was already moving. 2 shots dropped the operators nearest the van. She rolled behind, a concrete barrier as return fire chipped away at her cover. Wilson, she called out. A little help? The FBI agent was already in motion, having freed herself during the chaos. She tackled a guard, wrestling for his weapon. Aaliyah used the distraction to move positions, taking down another operator with precise shots. The remaining guards were scrambling for better angles, trying to flank her position. A new sound cut through the gunfire. Helicopter rotors. A spotlight stabbed down from above, illuminating the loading dock in harsh white light. Federal agents! A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. Drop your weapons! The man in the suit was already running, heading for a side exit. 2 Black Star operators moved to cover his escape, Laying down suppressing fire, Aaliyah emerged from cover. Weapon raised, the nearest guard turned to fire, but she was faster. 2 shots, center mass. He dropped. More helicopters appeared, their spotlights creating a web of illumination. Black-clad figures rappelled from the aircraft. FBI tactical teams in full assault gear. Clear. The call echoed across the facility as federal agents secured the area. Sarah Wilson approached, now holding a recovered weapon. Nice moves. You want to tell me who you really are? Just a concerned citizen, Aaliyah replied, scanning the chaos for the man in the suit. He was gone. Right. Sarah's expression was skeptical. We've been building this case for months. How did you know about the transport? I didn't. Just good timing. The other prisoners were being led to safety, including Julia and Maria. FBI. Medical teams were arriving to treat the injured. In the distance, more sirens approached. Real law enforcement this time. The man in the suit, Aaliyah said. You know who he is? Marcus Bennett, former CIA, now works for a private security firm. He's been on our radar for years, but no one could ever make anything stick. He'll lead us to the rest. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Us? I have unfinished business in Brookhaven. Sheriff Cole? Among others. Aaliyah checked her borrowed weapons magazine. The girl said something about ports and customs arrangements. Multiple ports up and down the coast. They're moving people out and weapons in through private shipping companies. Cole's department provides local cover, but it's bigger than him. We've identified connections to at least 3 senators and dozens of local officials. A familiar voice caught Aaliyah's attention. Captain Reynolds was speaking with FBI agents near one of the helicopters. He saw her and nodded slightly. You're inside, man? Sarah asked. He passed me information in the jail. Good to know he's one of yours. Best undercover operator I've ever worked with. He's been feeding us intel for months, trying to map the whole network. An FBI tactical team approached, carrying evidence bags filled with documents and hard drives. The facility's offices would provide a treasure trove of information, assuming they could get to it before the wrong people buried everything. Miss Carter? A young FBI agent held out a phone. Call for you. It was Ethan. Naomi's safe, he said without preamble. I got her out before they could move her. She's at a secure location with the evidence she gathered. Cole? Still at the station, but he's nervous. Word's spreading about the raid. His people are starting to run. Let them. They'll lead us to the rest. She ended the call as more FBI vehicles arrived. The facility was now crawling with federal agents, crime scene technicians, and medical personnel. The prisoners were being debriefed, their statements recorded for evidence. Sarah Wilson reappeared with a senior FBI agent. We're moving everyone to a secure location. You should come with us. But Aaliyah was already walking away. I have another stop to make. Cole's not going anywhere. We have the station surrounded. It's not Cole I'm worried about. Aaliyah paused. Bennett has friends in Brookhaven, high-ranking friends. They'll be cleaning house right now. Wait, Sarah called after her. At least take this. She handed over a secure radio. Frequencies encoded. You need backup. We'll be there. Aaliyah nodded thanks and disappeared into the gathering darkness. The helicopter spotlight still illuminated the facility behind her, but her path led back toward town, back to where it all started. The night air carried the promise of rain as she walked, her borrowed weapon secure in its holster. Somewhere in Brookhaven, people were burning documents, erasing hard drives, preparing to vanish. But she had a name, now Marcus Bennett, and a clearer picture of what she was facing. Time to remind some very bad people that they weren't the only professionals in town, and this time, she wasn't playing by their rules. The rain had started by the time Aaliyah reached the outskirts of Brookhaven. Her borrowed police weapon felt heavy against her side as she moved through the darkness, keeping to the shadows. The town was eerily quiet, with more patrol cars than usual cruising the empty streets, Cole's people looking for her. The safe house was an old hunting cabin owned by Ethan's family, tucked away in the woods 3 miles outside town. As she approached, she noticed fresh tire tracks in the mud, multiple vehicles. A dim light flickered behind heavy curtains. A twig snapped somewhere to her left. Aaliyah froze, then smiled slightly. "Your perimeter technique needs work, Calloway," she said quietly. A low chuckle came from the darkness, and James Calloway materialized from behind a tree. The former SEAL's massive frame was dressed in tactical black, a suppressed rifle held casually in his massive hands. "Just making sure you weren't followed, boss." His white teeth flashed in the darkness, though I should have known better. 3 years running missions together, never once saw anyone track you. They approached the cabin using an old recognition signal. 3 soft taps. Pause. 2 more. The door opened to reveal Ethan, looking tired but alert. Naomi sat at a battered table, surrounded by papers and laptop screens. "About time," Naomi said, standing to hug her friend. "Was getting worried they'd grabbed you again. Had to take the scenic route." Aaliyah surveyed the cabin's interior. 2 more figures emerged from the back room. A lean man with close-cropped gray hair and a woman whose athletic build couldn't be hidden by civilian clothes. "Meet the team," Calloway said. "Jack Grayson, former Delta, best tactician I've ever worked with. And Lena Jones, ex-CIA field operative. They both work private. Security now, the legitimate kind." "Call me Lena," the woman said. "And we've heard a lot about you, Lieutenant Carter." Aaliyah raised an eyebrow at Calloway, who shrugged. "They have clearance, and we need their skills for what's coming." "Which is what exactly?" Grayson asked, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl. "James called in a favor, said it was urgent, but details were sparse." Aaliyah moved to the table where Naomi had spread out her research. "Human trafficking operation running through Brookhaven. Local police providing cover, but it's bigger. Private military contractors, corrupt officials, international buyers. Just broke out of their detention facility with some help from the FBI. Black Star Security," Calloway added. "They're running muscle for the whole operation." Grayson whistled softly. "Nasty bunch. Ex-Special Forces gone bad with political connections." "There's more," Naomi said, pulling up documents on her laptop. "I've been tracking financial records. The weapons aren't just coming in. They're being stockpiled. Shell companies have been buying up properties all over the county. Old warehouses, abandoned factories. Building an infrastructure," Lena observed. "This isn't just a transit operation. They're establishing a permanent presence. With help from Sheriff Cole and his department," Ethan added. "But Cole's just middle management. The real power is higher up. A man named Marcus Bennett seems to be coordinating everything." Aaliyah leaned over Naomi's shoulder, studying property records on the screen. "The workhouse facility is just one piece. They'll have others. Staging areas, storage, meeting places. Already found 3 potentials." Grayson spread a map on the table, pointing to marked locations. Old lumber mill, abandoned factory on Route 9, and a private airstrip that's supposedly closed but showing recent activity. "Too many targets," Calloway said. "We hit one. They'll purge the others. Then we hit them all." Aaliyah traced routes on the map. "But first we need intel. Lena, can you get inside the police department?" The former CIA operative smiled. "Already have a cover ready. Local cleaning service just got a new contract. Amazing what credentials you can create with the right software." "Grayson, we need surveillance on the other locations. Track vehicle movements, security patterns, anything unusual." "On it. Got some toys that'll help. Long-range cameras, thermal imaging, maybe plant some motion sensors." "I'll coordinate from here," Ethan said. "Still have contacts in military. Intelligence who owe me favors. And Naomi's evidence needs to be organized for maximum impact when this goes public." Aaliyah nodded. "James, you're with me. We need to check something." "The airstrip? No. Walker's Market." They took Calloway's truck, driving carefully to avoid police patrols. The market's windows were dark, but Aaliyah spotted movement inside, flashlight beams dancing through the gloom. "Loading dock," she whispered as they crept closer. 3 vehicles. They watched as men carried boxes from the store's basement to waiting vans. Even in the poor light, their movements showed military training. "Weapons cache?" Calloway asked. "Or documents? Either way, they're clearing out evidence." She keyed the radio Sarah Wilson had given her. "Agent Wilson, Got some activity at Walker's Market you might be interested in. Already monitoring, came the reply. Stand down for now. We're building a bigger case. Aaliyah watched another van pull up. They're erasing their tracks. Then we document everything, Calloway said, raising a high-speed camera with night vision capability. Every face, every vehicle, every box. They photographed the operation for an hour before returning to the cabin. Lena had already left to set up her cleaning service cover, while Grayson was preparing surveillance gear. Progress? Aaliyah asked Naomi. Better than that. Her friend turned her laptop to show security camera footage. Captain Reynolds came through. Internal cameras from the police station. Look who visited Cole last week. The footage showed the sheriff meeting with Marcus Bennett. And another man, older, expensively dressed, his bearing screaming old money and power. That's Senator William Bradford, Ethan said. State Finance Committee, very interested in Port Authority oversight. Money trail? Aaliyah asked. Naomi nodded. Complex, but there's a pattern. Shell companies, offshore accounts, all linking back to a holding corporation called Maritime Logistics Solutions. Guess who sits on their board? Bradford? Along with 2 other senators and a federal judge. Naomi pulled up more documents. They've been buying influence at every major port on the eastern seaboard. Customs officials, dock workers, shipping companies, all bought and paid for. Creating their own supply chain, Grayson observed. Smart. Legal shipping provides cover for illegal cargo. Dawn was approaching. Lena would be starting her first shift at the police station soon. Grayson had already left to set up surveillance on the target locations. James, Aaliyah said, get some rest. Tonight we start hitting back. But before Calloway could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. Problem? Aaliyah asked. Contact at the Pentagon. There's a weapons shipment coming in tonight, big one. Russian-made anti-tank missiles, among other things. Location? That's the thing. Ethan showed her the message. Multiple sites. They're splitting the shipment to minimize risk. Or setting a trap, Calloway suggested. They have to know we're watching by now. Aaliyah studied the map again, mind racing through scenarios. How's your demo training, James? He grinned. Still, remember a few tricks? Good. Because tonight we're going to make some noise. She turned to Naomi. How fast can you get your story ready? Give me 12 hours to organize everything, but we'll need hard evidence to back it up. Documents, photographs, witness statements. You'll have them. Aaliyah checked her weapon. Time to remind these people why SEALs work in the dark. The day passed in careful preparation. Lena reported in every hour, mapping the police station's layout and personnel movements. Grayson's surveillance identified guard rotations and security systems at the target locations. By sunset, they were ready. Aaliyah stood in the cabin's main room, reviewing the plan with her team. Each person had their role, their targets, their contingencies. Remember, she said, we're not just fighting corrupt cops anymore. These are professional operators with serious backing. They'll have tactical training, top-tier weapons, and nothing to lose. Just like old times, Calloway said, checking. His gear. Exactly. Which means we do this by the book. Quick, clean, precise. No collateral damage, no loose ends. Ethan handed out encrypted radios. FBI's standing by for backup, but they won't move until we have solid evidence. Everything has to be documented. Questions? Aaliyah looked at each team member. When no one spoke, she nodded. Move out. They split into teams as darkness fell. Grayson headed for the lumber mill, while Lena maintained her cover at the police station. Calloway and Aaliyah took the abandoned factory on Route 9. The factory's perimeter security was good, but not perfect. They found a blind spot between camera coverage and slipped inside through a maintenance access panel. The interior was dark but not empty. Fresh tire tracks marked the dusty floor, and voices echoed from deeper in the building. Loading dock, Calloway whispered, pointing to moving shadows. They crept closer, using old machinery for cover. The loading dock was alive with activity. Men in tactical gear unloaded crates from a semi-trailer, their movements precise and professional. Armed guards patrolled catwalks above. Count? Aaliyah asked. 12 visible, probably more inside. All armed, all trained. Calloway raised his camera, documenting everything. Those crates have Russian military markings, a familiar voice carried across the space. Marcus Bennett stood supervising the operation, talking on a phone. Yes, Senator, everything's on schedule. The merchandise is being distributed now. By morning, it will all be in secure locations. He paused, listening. No. Cole's handling the local situation. Any evidence will be gone by... Wait. Bennett stopped suddenly, staring into the shadows where Aaliyah and Calloway hid. His hand moved toward his weapon. Company, Calloway breathed. Before Bennett could raise the alarm, the building's power cut out, plunging everything into darkness. Emergency lights kicked in, casting red shadows across the scene. Perimeter breach, someone shouted. Multiple contacts. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks as FBI tactical teams breached through skylights and side entrances. Bennett's men responded, professionally, taking cover and returning fire. That's our cue, Aaliyah said, moving toward a side exit. Their real target wasn't the weapons. It was the documentation that would be kept in the facility's offices. They encountered 2 guards in the corridor. Calloway took them down silently while Aaliyah breached the office door. Inside, a man was frantically feeding papers into a shredder. Step back, she ordered. He reached for a pistol instead. Aaliyah's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning, him away from the desk. The hard way then. While FBI teams handled the main fight, Aaliyah and Calloway secured the office. Hard drives, documents, shipping manifests, everything they needed to prove the operation's scope. Aaliyah. Calloway's voice was urgent. He held up a ledger. Look at these dates. They're not just planning shipments. They're planning something big. Some kind of coordinated operation across multiple ports. Before she could respond, her radio crackled. It was Grayson at the lumber mill. We've got trouble. Just intercepted communications. They're moving on the safe house. A full tactical team. Aaliyah's blood ran cold. Naomi and Ethan were still there organizing evidence. How long? Minutes. Maybe less. She looked at Calloway, who was already moving. Go, he said. I'll finish here. Aaliyah ran, the sound of gunfire fading behind her. In her ear, the radio carried updates from multiple positions. FBI teams securing the factory. Lena reporting police units mobilizing. Grayson tracking vehicle movements. But all she could think about was the cabin and her friends who were about to face trained killers with nothing to lose. The night wasn't over, not by a long shot. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Brookhaven hadn't seen legitimate business in years, but tonight it hummed with careful activity. Aaliyah's team had transformed the dusty space into a mobile command center, with monitors showing surveillance feeds from across town and tables covered in tactical gear. 3 more police units just left the station, Lena reported, watching. Camera feeds from her position inside the department. Her cleaning service uniform had provided perfect cover for planting surveillance devices throughout the building. They're nervous. Cole's been in his office for hours making calls. Let them sweat, Aaliyah said, studying a blueprint of the police station spread across a makeshift planning table. What about the evidence room? Heavy security, but I mapped the access points. Lena's voice crackled through the secured radio. They're destroying documents as fast as they can, but some things are too big to disappear quickly. Grayson entered from his surveillance position outside, shaking rain from his jacket. Movement at the lumber mill. 3 black SUVs arrived 10 minutes ago. Looks like our friend Bennett is meeting with someone important. Get closer, Aaliyah ordered. I want eyes and ears on that meeting. Already on it, he grabbed fresh surveillance. Gear from their equipment cache. But there's something else. I spotted Sarah Williams, the girl from the gas station, being escorted into the building. She wasn't going willingly. Aaliyah's jaw tightened. After the raid on the detention facility, Cole's people were getting desperate. Using civilians as leverage was a predictable move, but it still made her blood boil. Change of plans, she announced. Lena, maintain your cover, but be ready to move. Grayson, get me everything you can on that meeting. I'm going to make a house call. Where? Calloway asked, looking up from where he was cleaning his weapon. Walker's Market. Time to have a chat with Tom about what's really in his basement. The market's back entrance lock gave way easily to Alia's picks. Inside, the store was dark and quiet, but light seeped through cracks in the basement door. She moved silently down the stairs, hearing voices grow clearer. "Can't keep storing their stuff," Walker was saying, his voice strained. "The feds are watching everything now." "That's not your concern." The response came in a cold, familiar tone. "Deputy Miller, just keep your mouth shut and your basement available." Alia reached the bottom step, assessing the scene through the partially open door. Walker stood with his back to a wall of shelves, while Miller and another officer she didn't recognize kept him cornered. Boxes were stacked nearby, similar to the ones she'd seen being moved during the nighttime operation. She deliberately scuffed her boot on the concrete floor. Both officers spun, reaching for weapons. "Evening, gentlemen," she said calmly, stepping into view with her hands raised. "Having a stock problem, Tom?" "Carter." Miller's hand tightened on his holstered weapon but didn't draw. "You're supposed to be in custody. Plans change. Like those shipping manifests in the boxes behind you. They're about to change too." The other officer drew his weapon, but Alia was already moving. She crossed the space in 2 steps, disarming him with a precise strike before throwing him into a shelf. Miller managed to clear his holster before her elbow connected with his throat, dropping him gasping to the floor. "Tom," she said to the terrified store owner, "we need to talk about your storage rental business." 10 minutes later, she had what she needed. Walker's basement had been used as a document cache for months. Shipping records, financial transfers, blackmail material. The store's legitimate deliveries provided cover for other, less legal cargo movements. "They threatened my family," Walker said, hands shaking as he helped her load files into a duffel bag. "Said they'd make my daughter disappear like those other girls." "I know." Alia secured the unconscious officers with their own handcuffs. "But now you have a choice. Help us end this, or wait for them to decide you're a liability." Her radio crackled, Grayson's voice urgent in her ear. "Boss, you need to hear this. Bennett's meeting just wrapped up. They're accelerating everything. Details. Major shipment coming tonight. Weapons and merchandise moving through multiple ports simultaneously. But that's not the worst part." He paused. "They're cleaning house. Anyone who might talk is being eliminated. They've got hit teams prepped and target lists." Alia looked at Walker. "You need to disappear. Now. Take your family and drive until I contact you. But my store will be worth nothing if you're dead. Go." After Walker fled, she examined the documents he'd helped her retrieve. The scope of the operation was staggering. Shell companies, corrupt officials, international connections, all pointing to something even bigger than they'd suspected. Back at the warehouse command center, the team assembled to process the new intelligence. Naomi worked at a laptop cross-referencing data while Ethan made calls to his FBI contacts. "It's a power play," Lena said, having returned from her shift at the police station. "Bennett's group isn't just running weapons and trafficking operations. They're establishing control over the entire eastern seaboard's black market infrastructure. Using legitimate businesses as cover," Grayson added. "Shipping companies, storage facilities, even local police departments, all bought or blackmailed into compliance. And Brookhaven is their test case," Alia concluded. "If they can make it work here, they can replicate it anywhere," Calloway finished. "Small towns with corrupt officials, minimal oversight, easy access to transport routes." Naomi looked up from her screen. "I found something in Walker's files. Weekly payments to offshore accounts, all traced back to a holding company called Coastal Dynamics. The company's board includes 3 state judges and a port authority director." "They're buying the whole system," Ethan said. "Law enforcement, judiciary, shipping, vertical integration for organized crime. And anyone who might expose it ends up disappeared," Lena added. "Like Michael Ross, the journalist who started investigating." Alia studied the surveillance photos from the lumber mill meeting. "They're getting ready to expand, but first, they need to clean up loose ends here." Walker was right. They're making lists. Speaking of lists, Grayson activated a tablet, displaying interior footage of the lumber mill. Sarah Williams wasn't the only one they grabbed. I counted 3. More civilians being brought in. Looks like they're collecting leverage. Or hostages, Calloway suggested. Insurance against law enforcement interference. Either way, we need to move faster. Aaliyah turned to Ethan. What's the FBI's position? They're building a case, but they're worried about political interference. Too many powerful people involved. They want ironclad evidence before moving. Then we get it for them. She spread a map across the table. Grayson, you said they're moving everything tonight. Multiple ports, simultaneous shipments. Show me. He marked locations, small ports and private docks up and down the coast. Main shipment comes through here. He pointed to a private marina 20 miles north. Weapons and trafficking victims on the same boats. Smaller shipments at these. Other points as diversion. How many hostages at the lumber mill? At least 4 confirmed, probably more inside. Heavy security, 24 operators, professional setup. And the police station? Lena pulled up her surveillance feeds. Cole's mobilizing everything. Every corrupt cop in 3 counties is being called in. They're trying to lock down the town before anyone else talks. Timeline? Shipments start moving at midnight, Grayson said. About 4 hours from now. Aaliyah checked her weapon. Then we have 3 hours to get those hostages out and secure the evidence we need. Lena, get back to the station. I want to know the moment Cole makes a move. Grayson, maintain surveillance on the lumber mill. Map every entrance, every guard position. What about the shipments? Calloway asked. FBI can handle the ports. Our priority is the hostages and the documentation. Once we have those, the whole operation collapses. They'll be expecting us, Naomi warned. Good. Aaliyah smiled grimly. That means they'll be watching the obvious approaches. Ethan, get me building plans for the lumber mill. Complete plans, including maintenance tunnels and old logging routes. Already on it. He pulled up digital blueprints. Found these in the county archives. The mill has a network of underground passages, old drainage systems, and maintenance. Corridors. Most are probably collapsed, but some might still be accessible, Aaliyah finished. And they won't be watching century-old tunnels. She turned to Calloway. Remember that demo training we discussed? Time to put it to use. I want controlled charges here, here, and here. She marked points on the blueprint. Just enough to create chaos without risking the hostages. Classic divide and distract, he grinned. Like that operation in Save the War Stories, she cut him off. We have 2 hours to prep, then we move. Lena, get what you need from the station and get out. Once this starts, your cover's blown. Already copied their hard drives, Lena said. Including Cole's personal files. You should see some of these emails. Get them to Naomi. She'll start organizing everything for release. The team dispersed to their tasks, but Ethan held Aaliyah back. There's something else. That FBI agent, Sarah Wilson, she just sent a warning. Bennett's people grabbed your mother from the hospital. Aaliyah's blood ran cold. When? 20 minutes ago. Moved her to the lumber mill with the other hostages. The others paused, watching her reaction. They'd all read her file, knew her capabilities. But this was different. This was personal. Change of plans? Calloway asked. Quietly. No. Aaliyah's voice was steel. We stick to the mission. But Bennett just made his last mistake. She turned back to the blueprints, but her mind was already racing through combat scenarios. Bennett thought having her mother would give him leverage. Instead, he'd just signed his own death warrant. The storm was about to break over Brookhaven, and God help anyone standing in her way. Thunder rolled across Brookhaven as Aaliyah led her team through the abandoned drainage tunnel. Decades of debris made the going slow, but the old maintenance passage was exactly where the blueprints showed it would be, running directly beneath the lumber mill's main building. 200 meters to the access point, Calloway whispered, checking the digital map on his tactical pad. Behind him, Grayson and Lena moved silently in full combat gear. Aaliyah's night vision showed the tunnel walls glistening with moisture. The air grew thick with the smell of rotting wood and stagnant water. But somewhere above them, her mother and other hostages were being held by desperate men. The discomfort meant nothing. Hold, she signaled, raising her fist. Ahead, moonlight filtered through gaps in an old grating. Voices carried down from above, guards making their rounds. Don't like this, someone was saying. Feds are closing in. We should bug out now. Bennett's orders, another voice replied. Nobody moves until the shipment's confirmed. Besides, with these hostages, nobody's gonna risk. The voices faded. Aaliyah touched her radio, keeping her voice just above a whisper. Ethan, status? FBI teams are in position at all port locations, came the reply. They're tracking 3 vessels approaching the coast. No move until you secure the hostages. Understood, Naomi. Ready with the data dump. 1 signal from you, and everything goes public. Shipping records, financial transactions, emails, all of it. Aaliyah checked her watch. 20 minutes until Calloway's charges would create their distraction. She could feel her team's tension, controlled, professional, but present. They all knew the stakes. Remember, she said, primary objective is hostage extraction. Evidence retrieval second. Bennett and his people are tertiary targets only. No unnecessary risks. They reached the access point, a maintenance shaft leading up to the mill's sub-basement. Decades of rust had sealed the hatch, but Calloway's breaching tools made short work of it. One by one, they climbed into the darkness above. The mill's sub-basement was a maze of old machinery and storage rooms. Their intel suggested the hostages were being held 2 floors up, in what used to be the main office area. Bennett would want them close for quick leverage. Time, Aaliyah whispered. 3 minutes to first charge, Calloway replied. They moved through the shadows, avoiding the few cameras Grayson hadn't already looped. The floor above creaked with the weight of patrolling guards. At least 24 mercenaries in the building, all ex-military, plus however many of Cole's corrupt officers were on site. The first explosion came right on schedule. The controlled charge at the facility's north end was small but loud, designed to draw attention and resources. Shouts and running feet echoed through the building. Second charge in 30 seconds. Calloway counted down. Southside loading dock. The next blast sparked chaos. Radio chatter erupted as Bennett's men tried to coordinate their response. Multiple threats, unknown attackers, exactly the confusion they needed. Move, Aaliyah commanded. They climbed to the main floor using an old freight elevator shaft, emerging behind a stack of moldering crates. 2 guards ran past, heading toward the explosions. Neither saw the shadows detach from the wall behind them. Lena and Grayson dealt with the guards silently, hiding the unconscious men in a storage closet. Ahead, the main office area was visible through gaps in the warehouse shelving. 6 tangos, Grayson reported, checking through his scope. 4 on patrol, 2 watching the hostages directly. Aaliyah found a sightline through the shelves. The hostages, 8 total, including her mother and Sarah Williams, were zip-tied to support columns. They looked scared but unharmed. Bennett paced nearby, barking orders into a phone. No, we don't evacuate, he was saying. The shipment's too close. Keep the roads locked down. No one in or out of Brookhaven until... The third charge cut him off, this one targeting the building's power distribution. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in red shadows. Perfect. FBI teams moving on the ports, Ethan reported through their earpieces. Coast Guard intercepting vessels. Bennett's phone erupted with panic calls. The shipping operation was falling apart. Now they just had to... Sir, a guard burst in from outside. Police scanner. FBI raid at all port locations. They're hitting everything at once. Bennett's face contorted with rage. Cole! Get me Cole! But the sheriff wasn't responding. According to Lena's bugs, the police station was in chaos. Officers were choosing sides, destroying evidence, or simply fleeing. Kill the hostages, Bennett ordered. No witnesses, then burn everything. That was all Aaliyah needed to hear. Execute. Her team moved with practiced precision. Suppressed weapons coughed in the darkness. The 2 guards nearest the hostages dropped before they could react. Grayson's shot took down the radio man heading for the alarm. But Bennett's remaining men were professionals. They dove for cover, returning fire from behind machinery and crates. The hostages screamed as bullets sparked off metal around them. Calloway and Lena moved to flank while Aaliyah provided covering fire. Bennett scrambled toward a side door, shouting orders. 2 more guards emerged from a stairwell, forcing Grayson to redirect his fire. Aaliyah caught movement in her peripheral vision. A guard drawing aim on the hostages. Her double tap dropped him, but the distraction cost her. Another mercenary rushed her position, forcing her into hand-to-hand. He was good. Special forces training evident in his technique. But Aaliyah was better. She absorbed his first strike, used his momentum to slam him into a support beam, then finished him with a precise throat strike. "Clear left," Calloway called. "Clear right," Lena confirmed. "Bennett's running," Grayson reported. "Secondary exit, heading for the vehicles." "Let him," Aaliyah ordered. "Hostages first." They secured the room and moved to free the captives. Margaret Carter's eyes were wide but steady as her daughter cut her loose. "Baby, what's happening?" These men said. "Later, Mom. We need to move." But escaping wouldn't be simple. Engines roared outside as more vehicles arrived. Reinforcements, probably Cole's people, coming to back up Bennett. "Ethan," Aaliyah called through the radio. "We need an exit." "Working. On it. FBI teams are 15 minutes out, but..." Gunfire erupted from the direction of the loading dock. Heavy caliber weapons, definitely not standard police issue. "More Black Star operators," Grayson reported. "Full tactical gear. They're setting up a perimeter." Aaliyah did the math. 8 hostages, 4 operators, and at least a dozen heavily armed mercenaries between them and any exit. The tunnels would be too slow with civilians. "James, those other charges still ready?" "Armed and waiting." "Light them up. All of them." Multiple explosions rocked the building. Not just distractions this time. Targeted breaches designed to create chaos and structural damage. Part of the roof collapsed, and smoke began filling the warehouse space. "This way." Aaliyah led the group toward the loading dock. The smoke would provide cover, and the collapsed sections would channel Bennett's men into predictable approaches. They encountered resistance at the dock entrance. 3 mercenaries had set up a hasty fighting position. Calloway and Grayson provided covering fire while Lena led the hostages along the wall. Aaliyah engaged the closest operator. His first burst missed high as she closed distance. Her return. Fire caught him in the chest. The second man tried to adjust his aim but took one of Grayson's rounds instead. The third shooter proved more problematic. His position behind a forklift gave him good coverage of their exit route. But he hadn't counted on Margaret Carter. Aaliyah's mother, despite her illness, proved her daughter's heritage. She grabbed a fallen pipe and hurled it with surprising accuracy. The distraction was enough. The mercenary's head appeared for a split second, time enough for Calloway's shot to find its mark. "Mom," Aaliyah started. "Later," Margaret said firmly. "You can explain everything later." They fought. Their way across the loading dock. Bennett's remaining men were trying to flank through the smoke, but the team kept them pinned with controlled bursts. The hostages stayed low, following Lena's guidance. "Vehicles!" Grayson spotted their salvation. 3 SUVs parked behind the building. If they could reach them. More gunfire swept the dock. A new group of operators had set up on the catwalks above. Bullets sparked off concrete as the team dove for cover. "James," Aaliyah called. "Last charges," he confirmed. "Might bring the whole place down." "Do it." The final explosions hit the catwalk supports. Metal screamed as the structures collapsed, taking Bennett's men with them. The distraction allowed the team to reach the vehicles. "Go," Aaliyah ordered as Lena and Grayson loaded the hostages into 2 SUVs. "Get them clear. We'll hold them off." Her mother resisted. "Aaliyah, no! Mom, please, I'll be right behind you." Calloway maintained covering fire while the vehicles pulled away. Bennett's remaining forces were regrouping, preparing for a final push. "FBI's 10 minutes out," Ethan reported. "Won't matter if Bennett escapes," Aaliyah replied. "James, you see him?" "Negative." "Wait." Calloway focused his scope on movement near the tree line. "Got him. Loading something into a truck. Looks like hard drives, documents." "Evidence." Aaliyah checked her ammunition. "Cover me." She moved through the smoke, using the chaos of the collapsing building for concealment. Bennett was alone, frantically, transferring boxes from a small building into his vehicle. His personal escape cache. "It's over, Bennett," she called, emerging from the smoke with her weapon trained on him. He spun, reaching for his sidearm. "Carter, should have known." "The ports are compromised." Cole's operation is finished. Your mercenaries are being rounded, up as we speak. You think this ends with me? He laughed harshly. This is bigger than Brookhaven. We have people everywhere. Ports, customs, law enforcement. Take me down. 2 more operations start up somewhere else. Maybe, but you'll still rot in prison. His hand twitched toward his weapon. Aaliyah's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him against the truck. That's for the girls you trafficked, she said coldly. The next one won't be so gentle. Red and blue lights appeared on the horizon, FBI tactical teams finally arriving. Bennett looked at his bleeding shoulder, then at the evidence he'd tried to save. Your choice, Aaliyah told him. Die here, or live to testify. Either way, your operation is finished. He considered for a moment, then slowly raised his hands. Later, as FBI teams secured the scene, Aaliyah found her mother waiting by one of the tactical vehicles. They looked at each other for a long moment. A military consultant? Margaret asked pointedly. Mom, my daughter, the Navy SEAL. She shook her head, but there was pride in her eyes. We are going to have a very long talk about keeping secrets. Aaliyah couldn't help smiling. Yes, ma'am. Dawn was breaking over Brookhaven as the last of Bennett's men were taken into custody. The other hostages were reunited with their families. Sarah Williams hugged her sister Elena, both crying with relief. Cole? Aaliyah asked as Lena approached. FBI has him. Most of his officers surrendered when they saw which way the wind was blowing. The rest won't get far. The evidence? Naomi's already releasing it. Newspapers, TV stations, federal authorities. Everyone gets copies. No one can bury this. Aaliyah watched the sun rise over her hometown. The corruption that had poisoned it was exposed, its perpetrators facing justice. But Bennett's words haunted her. This was bigger than Brookhaven. What now, boss? Calloway asked, joining her. She thought about the other towns like Brookhaven, the other corrupt officials and traffickers still operating in shadows. Now, she said, we get back to work. The storm had passed, but there would be others, and Aaliyah Carter would be ready for them all. The raid on the cartel safe house came at dawn, 3 days after Bennett's capture. Aaliyah led her team through the pre-morning gloom, approaching a seemingly abandoned lakeside mansion that satellite imagery had revealed as a key data storage location. Inside those walls lay the digital heart of the trafficking operation. Servers containing years of records, transactions, and blackmail material. Security system bypassed, Lena whispered through the radio, her fingers flying over a specialized tablet. External cameras are looped. You've got 4 minutes before their failsafe kicks in. Aaliyah signaled to Calloway and Grayson. They moved like shadows across the manicured lawn, years of special operations training evident in every silent step. The mansion's occupants had no idea they were coming. The element of surprise their greatest advantage against the cartels. Professional security force. The first guard never saw them coming. Grayson's precise chokehold rendered him unconscious before he could reach his radio. They secured him with zip ties and moved deeper into the property. 2 tangos on the back. Patio, Calloway reported through their tactical net. Armed with submachine guns. Professional stance. Probably ex-military. Take them, Aaliyah ordered. The team moved with practiced coordination. Suppressed weapons coughed in the dim light, and both guards dropped without raising the alarm. But they weren't the real target. Inside, they encountered 3 more security personnel, all dealt with silently and efficiently. The mansion's lower level was clear within minutes, leading them to their primary objective, a sophisticated server room hidden behind a false wall in the library. Jackpot, Lena said, as she connected to the systems. They've got everything. Here, financial records, shipping manifests, client lists. This isn't just about Brookhaven. They've got operations in dozens of ports. Download everything, Aaliyah commanded. Grayson, watch our backs. James, with me, we sweep the upper floor. But before they could move, Naomi's voice crackled through their comms. Breaking news hitting now. Stories gone viral. Every major network is picking it up. The team had been busy since the lumber mill raid. While FBI teams processed Bennett and his captured mercenaries, Naomi had been organizing the evidence into a devastating expose. Now, that story was exploding. Across the media landscape. How bad? Aaliyah asked. Nuclear, Naomi replied. 3 senators implicated, dozen of judges, police chiefs in multiple jurisdictions. The Port Authority director just committed suicide in his office. Stock prices for maritime logistics solutions are in freefall. They'll try to contain it, Grayson warned. People this powerful don't go down easily. He was right. Already, their surveillance had picked up increased chatter. Private jets filing sudden flight plans, bank accounts being emptied, documents being destroyed. The corrupt network was trying to dismantle itself before investigators could follow the threads, but they were too late. Ethan's voice joined the conversation. FBI just launched coordinated raids in 12 cities. Federal prosecutors are unsealing indictments. No one's burying this. A noise from above caught their attention. Someone was moving rapidly through the mansion's upper floor. Multiple targets, Calloway reported, checking thermal imaging. They're grabbing something from the master suite. More evidence, Aaliyah concluded. Don't let them destroy it. They bounded up the grand staircase, weapons ready. 2 men in expensive suits were frantically stuffing documents into briefcases while a third covered the door with a military-grade assault rifle. The firefight was brief but intense. The guard was good, special forces training evident in his tactics, but Aaliyah and her team were better. When it ended, 3 suspects were in custody, and the documents were secure. These are ledgers, Lena said, examining the papers. Detailed records of payoffs, blackmail, political contributions. They've got dirt on everyone. Get it all to Naomi, Aaliyah ordered. Every piece adds weight to the story. The sun was fully up by the time they finished securing the mansion. FBI evidence response teams arrived to process the scene, adding to the mountain of documentation being assembled against the conspiracy. Back at their temporary command center, Naomi had transformed a wall into a complex diagram of connections. Photos, documents, and strings linking players in the criminal network. At the center was Marcus Bennett, now singing like a bird in federal custody. Bennett's testimony is opening everything, she explained as the team gathered. He's naming names, providing account numbers, revealing the whole structure. Says he'd rather talk than end up dead in his cell. Smart man, Grayson commented. His former employers aren't known for leaving loose ends. What about Cole? Aaliyah asked. Still in custody, Ethan replied. Most of his officers have turned state's evidence trying to cut deals. The ones who ran are being rounded up by federal task forces. The evidence from the mansion's servers proved devastating. It revealed a criminal empire spanning the entire eastern seaboard, a sophisticated network of corrupt officials, compromised law enforcement, and international criminals working together to move weapons, drugs, and human trafficking victims through American ports. Look at these shipping manifests, Lena said, scrolling through downloaded files. They were moving everything. Russian weapons, Chinese drugs, people from all over the world, using legitimate cargo as cover. And making a fortune doing it, Calloway added. These offshore accounts hold millions, all carefully hidden behind shell companies and fake charities. But the conspiracy hadn't just relied on greed. A folder labeled Insurance contained thousands of photographs, videos, and recordings, blackmail material on judges, politicians, business leaders. Anyone who might have exposed the operation had been compromised or threatened into silence. They've got a Supreme Court justice, Naomi said in disbelief, examining one file. These photos. No wonder he kept ruling in their favor on maritime cases. The scale of corruption was staggering. Port authorities had been bribed to ignore suspicious cargo. Customs officials were paid to lose paperwork. Police departments were funded to provide security and cover-ups. Politicians received campaign contributions to block investigations. It's like a cancer, Ethan observed, spreading through every level of the system. Not anymore, Aaliyah said firmly. Naomi, make sure every piece of evidence gets to the right authorities. Multiple copies, multiple agencies. No one can bury all of it. But even as they worked, their surveillance picked up disturbing chatter. Private security contractors were being hired in unprecedented numbers. Known assassins were booking flights to the East Coast. The conspiracy's hidden masters were preparing to silence anyone who might testify. They're desperate, Grayson noted. Desperate people make mistakes. Or become more dangerous, Lena countered. These people aren't used to losing control. A priority alert flashed across their monitors. Sarah Wilson, the FBI agent who had helped expose the operation, had narrowly escaped an assassination attempt. 2 gunmen had attacked her safe house, but her protective detail had fought them off. They're targeting witnesses, Aaliyah concluded. Everyone who might testify needs protection now. Already coordinating with the Marshal Service, Ethan reported. But they're stretched thin. Too many people to protect. Then we help. Aaliyah turned to her team. Lena, get me everything on potential threats. Hired guns, contract killers, anyone they might use. Grayson, coordinate with your security contacts. Set up safe houses and extraction routes. James, we need weapons and gear. What about the evidence? Naomi asked. Keep releasing it. Every hour we wait gives them time to spin the story or eliminate witnesses. No delays, no holding back. Everything goes public. The impact was immediate. Stock markets tumbled as implicated companies were exposed. Political offices released hasty statements distancing themselves from the scandal. Law enforcement agencies launched internal investigations. But the most dramatic reaction came from the criminal organizations themselves. The conspiracy had maintained an uneasy peace between rival cartels and smuggling operations. With that structure crumbling, old enmities resurfaced. Gang war breaking out in Boston, Lena reported, monitoring police channels. Cartel gunmen hitting rival operations in New York. Miami PD reporting multiple shootings at shipping companies. They're turning on each other, Grayson observed. Every criminal organization connected to the ports is trying to grab territory before someone else does. Let them fight, Aaliyah said. Makes it harder for them to target witnesses. More FBI raids were launching across the country, targeting locations identified in the seized documents. Corrupt officials were being arrested. Overseas accounts were being frozen. The entire criminal network was unraveling, but the conspiracy's real leaders remained hidden. Bennett had hinted at an inner circle. Wealthy, powerful people who had conceived and bankrolled the entire operation. They were the ones hiring assassins, trying desperately to maintain control. Got something, Naomi called out. Cross-referenced. The financial data with travel records. Private jet movements matching dates of key meetings. Always the same pattern. A Gulfstream registered to a shell company landing at small airports near ports. Track it, Aaliyah ordered. The pattern emerged clearly once they knew what to look for. The jet had visited every major port city where the conspiracy operated, always just before new smuggling routes were established or law enforcement was compromised. Aircraft scheduled to land tonight, Lena reported. Private airfield outside Philadelphia. Maximum security, very exclusive clientele. The inner circle, Aaliyah said. Coming to handle the crisis personally. Could be a trap, Calloway. Warned. Definitely a trap, but also our best chance to get the people really running this operation. The team began planning immediately. The private airfield would be well defended, especially with the conspiracy in crisis mode. But that same crisis meant its leaders were taking risks they normally wouldn't. FBI teams will be ready, Ethan assured them. One signal from us, they'll move in. No. Aaliyah studied the airfield's layout. We do this quiet. If they see a federal raid coming, they'll scatter. We need to get close, identify everyone on that plane. Then what? Naomi asked. Then we make sure no one can bury this story ever again. The sun was setting over their command center as the team prepared for the night's operation. They cleaned weapons, checked gear, and studied satellite imagery of the target. But even as they worked, news continued breaking across the country. More officials arrested, more evidence revealed, more witnesses coming forward. The conspiracy had spent years building its network of corruption, using money and violence to create a seemingly untouchable criminal empire. Now, in the span of a few days, that empire was crumbling. All that remained was to expose the architects behind it all. In a few hours, they would arrive on their private jet, expecting to find a crisis they could still control. Instead, they would find Aaliyah Carter and her team waiting in the darkness. And this time, there would be nowhere left to hide. The private airfield glowed softly in the midnight darkness. its runway lights casting long shadows across the tarmac. From her concealed position near the perimeter fence, Aaliyah watched security teams patrol the grounds, a mix of local contractors and Black Star operators. They were professional but nervous, everyone on edge after the events of the past few days. Gulfstream just entered local airspace, Lena reported through their tactical net. 20 minutes out. Security count? Aaliyah asked. 16 visible. Operators, probably more inside the terminal. They've got serious hardware. Military-grade weapons, body armor, encrypted comms. Overwatch in position, Grayson confirmed from his sniper's nest in a nearby water tower. I can see thermal signatures in the terminal building. Looks like at least 6 more hostiles. Aaliyah checked her own weapon one last time. After the conspiracy's exposure, its leaders were taking no chances. The airfield had been locked down, tight, with multiple security layers and emergency response teams on standby. Remember, she told her team, we need positive identification of everyone on that plane. Photos, video, everything. These people have spent years hiding in shadows. Tonight that ends. FBI teams are staged 5 miles out, Ethan added through the comms. They'll move on your signal, but only after we have hard evidence. The conspiracy's inner circle had remained frustratingly anonymous throughout the investigation. Even Bennett Sassat's testimony only hinted at their identities. Wealthy, powerful figures who orchestrated everything from a distance. Tonight's emergency meeting was their first mistake. Movement at the terminal, Calloway reported. Staff rolling out the red carpet. These people like their luxury, even in a crisis. Naomi, you reading this? Cameras are active, the journalist confirmed from their mobile command center. High-resolution video feeding straight to secure servers. No one can erase this evidence. The Gulfstream appeared as a distant light in the sky, growing larger as it approached. Security teams moved with practiced efficiency, forming a protective corridor from the runway to the terminal. Whatever happened next, the conspiracy's leaders weren't taking chances with their safety. Lena, status on those security systems? Almost there. Got it. Their internal network is compromised. I can see everything. Cameras, door controls, communications. Want me to kill the power? Not yet. Let them land first. We need faces. Thurby, private jet touched down smoothly, its engines winding down as it taxied toward the terminal. Ground crew rushed to position the boarding stairs while security teams maintained their protective perimeter. First vehicle approaching, Grayson reported. Armored SUV, diplomatic plates, 4 more behind it. A convoy of black vehicles had emerged from a private hangar, forming up near the plane. More security personnel deployed, creating multiple layers of protection around the arrival zone. Coming down the stairs now, Calloway said. First subject. Holy shit. Aaliyah's tactical scope confirmed his surprise. The man descending from the plane was immediately recognizable. William Bradford, the senior senator they'd already linked to the conspiracy. But he wasn't alone. Multiple subjects exiting, Lena reported, her camera capturing everything. Confirming identities. Senator James Morrison, Maritime Commission. Judge Anthony Reynolds, Federal Appeals Court. Diana Blackwood, CEO of Atlantic Shipping Corporation. One by one, the conspiracy's architects emerged. Power brokers who had orchestrated years of corruption and human trafficking finally exposed to the light. Last passenger, Grayson called out. Male, elderly. Wait, that's... Former Vice President Richard Stevens, Aaliyah finished grimly. The man who had shaped maritime policy for over a decade was here, directly implicated in the criminal empire. Jesus, Naomi breathed. No wonder they could bury everything. With connections at that level. Not anymore, Aaliyah said firmly. Lena, cut the power. Now. The airfield plunged into darkness as the main power failed. Emergency lights kicked in, casting weird shadows across the tarmac. Security teams reacted professionally, moving to protect their principals, but the confusion was already spreading. Go loud, Aaliyah commanded. Grayson's first shot took out the lead vehicle's engine block, trapping the convoy in place. Calloway triggered his prepared charges, and strategic explosions around the perimeter added to the chaos. Security teams didn't know where to look or what to shoot at. Aaliyah's team moved like ghosts through the darkness, using the confusion to penetrate the defensive perimeter. The Black Star operators were good, but they were reacting to a situation, spinning out of control. Federal agents. The FBI's voice boomed through loudspeakers as tactical teams suddenly appeared, having used the chaos to approach undetected. This facility is surrounded. Lay down your weapons. Some security teams tried to resist. Gunfire erupted across the tarmac as others attempted to get their principals back to the plane. But the conspiracy's carefully planned escape was collapsing into chaos. Aaliyah moved through the firefight with lethal precision. A Black Star operator raised his weapon at her, too slow. Her double tap dropped him as she advanced. Another tried to block her path and learned why Navy SEALs were considered among the world's deadliest close combat fighters. Subjects are splitting up, Grayson reported. 3 heading for the hangars, others falling back to the terminal. James, take the hangars, Aaliyah ordered. Lena, lock down the terminal. No one leaves. She spotted Senator Bradford making a run for it, 2 bodyguards providing cover fire. Her team's response was immediate and overwhelming. The bodyguards went down under precise fire, leaving the senator exposed. It's over, she told him, weapon trained on his chest. Unless you want to explain to voters why you're having a shootout. At a private airfield, more FBI teams were swarming the facility now. The remaining security forces, seeing the situation was hopeless, began surrendering. Even hardened Black Star operators knew when a fight was lost. Clear, the call echoed, across multiple channels as federal agents secured the area. One by one, the conspiracy's leaders were taken into custody. Senators, judges, executives, all headed for federal detention, but the former vice president was nowhere to be found. Got movement, Lena called out. Underground parking level. Looks like Stevens had an escape tunnel prepared. Like hell, Aaliyah snarled, sprinting for the access door. She took the stairs 3 at a time, hearing engines roar beneath her. The parking garage was dimly lit, but she could see a vehicle attempting to access a concealed exit. Not today. Her shots took out the rear tires, sending the armored car skidding into a concrete barrier. Stevens emerged with his hands raised, his dignity intact despite the situation. Lieutenant Carter, I presume? Sir. She kept her weapon trained on him. I respected you once, voted for you even. The world is more complex than you know, he said calmly. Sometimes maintaining order requires compromise. Compromise? Her voice was ice. You sold children, destroyed lives, all for profit and power. We maintained stability, controlled the criminal elements that would have run wild otherwise. Everything we did served a greater purpose. Tell that to Elena Williams, to all the other girls you trafficked, to their families. FBI agents were approaching behind her. Stevens seemed to deflate slightly, his carefully maintained facade cracking. I suppose I'll have time to work on my explanations, he said quietly, though I doubt anyone will believe them now. Dawn was breaking by the time the scene was fully secured. Evidence teams photographed and documented everything while federal agents processed the suspects. News helicopters circled overhead. The conspiracy's final moments would be very public indeed. Naomi's story is everywhere, Ethan reported. Every major network, every newspaper. No one can bury this now. What about the Black Star operators? Aaliyah asked. Most are in custody. Some fought to the end. Professional pride, I guess. The rest are already trying to make deals. The scale of evidence was staggering. The conspirators had brought documents and hard drives, planning to coordinate their damage control efforts. Instead, they delivered even more proof of their crimes directly to federal authorities. Found something interesting in Stevens's briefcase, Lena said, approaching with a tablet. Contingency plans. They had backup infrastructure ready, other ports, other officials willing to be bought. They were planning to rebuild everything. Not anymore, Aaliyah replied firmly. Send it all to Justice Department. Every name, every connection. She watched as Stevens was led to a federal transport vehicle, his wrists cuffed in front of him. The former vice president caught her eye and nodded slightly, acknowledgement from one professional to another perhaps. Or maybe just resignation. The sun climbed higher as Aaliyah's team regrouped near their vehicles. The FBI would handle things from here, building cases and coordinating with prosecutors. Investigations would spread, following the evidence to other corrupt officials and criminal enterprises. Hell of a week, Calloway commented, cleaning his weapon. Remind me of that operation in Classified. Aaliyah cut him off with a small smile. Besides, this was different. This was home. Speaking of home. Grayson nodded toward an approaching vehicle. Margaret Carter stepped out, looking better than she had in weeks. The doctors cleared me this morning, she said before Aaliyah could protest. And I wanted to see this finished. Mother and daughter embraced, neither needing words. Margaret had watched the news coverage, seen the evil her daughter had helped expose. There would be time for explanations later. Agent Wilson called, Ethan reported. They're moving Sarah and Elena Williams to a new safe house. Witness protection is already reaching out to other victims, offering assistance and protection. And Cole? Aaliyah asked, singing like a bird. He and Bennett are competing to see who can give up more information first. Their testimony will help seal the case. Aaliyah looked across the airfield, where federal agents were still processing suspects and collecting evidence. The conspiracy had seemed untouchable just days ago. Wealthy, powerful people who thought they could traffic in human lives without consequences. Now they were learning that no one was above justice. Not corrupt police, not criminal cartels, not even a former vice president. What now, boss? Calloway asked. There are other operations out there, other towns like Brookhaven. Now we rest, she replied. But not for long, her mother squeezed, her hand, understanding in her eyes. Margaret Carter had raised a warrior, though she hadn't known it at the time. Now she understood what drove her daughter. The need to protect, to fight, to bring light to dark places. The conspiracy was finished, its leaders facing justice, its infrastructure dismantled. But there would be other fights, other missions, other evils to confront, and Aaliyah Carter would be ready for them all. The sun rose fully over the airfield as federal transports carried the conspirators away. A new day was dawning, not just for Brookhaven, but for every community that had suffered under corruption's shadow. It was a good day to be on the side of justice.